Okay, at this time, we try to focus in on the Pasha of the week and try to relate it to the time, and relate it to ourselves, and try to get some both guidance and inspiration from that which we discuss. This Pasha, the Pasha of this week, is not only clearly related to the period of the year, but it actually speaks about it, almost verbatim, almost directly. Can I say English well? If anybody has any difficulty in understanding something, you can please stop me, try to help you out. Right, Chaim? We all are gearing up for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a very special moment. It's special on a general scale, so to speak, on the world scale, on the national scale. All Eden gathered together, and we ask Hashem that Hashem should forgive us and should accept should become the king. We'll discuss it perhaps, and then there is also Rosh Hashanah is a moment where every individual comes to recognize himself. Because when a person is involved in all kinds of worldly considerations, concerns, he has influences from experiences, has influences from his circumstance, he's in need of something, he's concerned about himself. He loses touch with who he is. And he does not find the freedom of mind and the peace of mind to stop himself and reflect, what is this all about? Who am I? What am I aiming at? Where do I come from and where am I going? Because we're talking about a human being. A human being, in addition to his natural needs, to his physical needs, and all his comforts and discomforts, heat and cold, primarily a human being is the intellect. When we mean the intellect, we don't mean academic intellectualism, that he can understand and figure things out what's doing in the higher cosmos. Intellect means that he relates, he needs to know, and he knows, and he relates to things at the level of their true value, of their we call an intrinsic value, something that has a real value for itself. This is the difference between the emotion and the senses and the intellect. The emotion is very what we call subjective. I feel good, I don't feel good. I like it, I don't like it. That also exists in the human being. But if a human being is only experiencing life at that level, after a while he loses completely sight of his human quality. This is what happens, in fact, in our big world. Where we kind of lose clarity, we lose the strength to lead ourselves on the basis of principle, and we get drawn into the experiential life. What's comfortable, what's tasty, what looks right, what's tangible. And after a while, we come to realize I have lost my own self. I am completely, totally under the influence of one thing or another. The weather is good, oh, I'm great. The weather is bad, I'm at a loss. But human life has to be distinguished clearly from any other existence in the world. It has a purpose. It has a meaning. That purpose and meaning is identified and is sensed in the intellect. This is where a person recognizes, has a personal identification. One principal difference that we all recognize and we all submit to is that lahavdil, animals, be referred to by species. A lion, lions, tiger, a cat, a dog, a cow, a sheep. Human beings we don't refer to by species. Human beings are referred to by specific reference. Every person has a name. Every person has a place in the world. An individual name. The name defines who he is, what's his place in the world. We know that under very painful circumstances, like they say in prison, a person feels very pained because he's no longer an individual, he's a number. When the person is referred to by number, he is very deeply hurt. Why is he hurt? What's the difference what his reference is? Because that is a principle in human life. That is what a human being is. He has a purpose, he has a real presence. Despite the fact there are 5 billion people in the world, that doesn't change his own presence and the value of his presence. Why is that? Well, principally we explain that is due to his intellect. But what is it that he recognizes in this intellect that makes it imperative? Everybody understands every word I'm saying? Imperative. That makes it a requirement that he can think of his purpose as an individual. This is expressed in today's parsha, right in the beginning of the parsha. You all learned, I'm sure, at the beginning of the parsha, Atem Nitzovim hayoim kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. You are all standing today lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, in front of Hashem. And then Moshe Rabbeinu goes on and he actually identifies the various groups of people that are standing there. 10 groups he identifies. First he says all of you. Then he says, all of you are together. But actually, within that togetherness, there are individuals. And every individual counts. 10 groups. Rosheichem, Shiftechem, the heads, the scholars, the leaders, the greats, and then Shoiv Mimecho, the water carrier. And they're all standing together. Each one is identified. What comparison is there between this Rosheichem Shiftechem? Do I have to translate Rosheichem, the heads, Shiftechem, your judges and your officers, all people responsible for communal affairs and for everything that's going on, and then the water carrier. How are they standing together? What comparison is there? And the answer is, because you are standing lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. You are standing in front of Hashem. And what is that? How is that answer the question? Despite the fact that there are vast differences between one and another person, there's one point where they all have of similar quality. And this quality is of such value that it supersedes, is greater than any of the differences between them. And what is this value? That they all recognize that they are in the presence of Hashem. This is a moment, this is a principle that I want to focus in and have you recognize the reality of this. Because as we said before, that every person has an intellect. Every person wants to know who he is individually. What is the significance of his individuality? Why does he care if he's referred by number? The apple that he's going to eat is going to be the same. Because deep down in his mind, in the deep crevices of his mind, he knows that he is standing in front of Hashem. He knows that he is for real. He is not just a passing shadow, just this poor water carrier. He is for real. His life is for real. His life is purposeful. And every one of his actions are valuable. Moreover, he's going to have to account for them, regardless of what his status is. Because he has a godly soul in him. And this makes him, gives him a reality greater than any that can be identified in the world. And gives him an individual reality. The focus that I'd like to take you with me is in this. We all know, nobody has to be told that he would like to have real accomplishment. He wants to be real. Everybody who comes to yeshiva, he wants to learn in yeshiva, he wants to have something real. But then there is a prevailing, a constant conflict in the person. He sits and learns Torah, sits and learns very deep and meaningful concepts that are meaningful, so to speak, intellectually. And then he looks around, opens his eyes, looks at the world, and says, what is this? This is all imaginary. This is all in your mind. This is all my imagination. What is the reality in the world? That which is tangible. If you have $1 in your pocket, you got something. There is this little voice, this cynic within him. You know what a cynic is? Cynic?
What?
Cynic?
No, not.
Somebody always sees the downside.
Huh?
Somebody always sees the negative.
No, that's a pessimist.
Cynic is like... Cynic is like...
A cynic is the one who makes nothing of everything. He says, don't fool yourself, you know. You're making believe, you're imagining, you don't really mean it.
It's like a little more Moloch inside.
Like a little Moloch inside him. And one of the most powerful approaches of this destructive cynic is that he comes to the person and he says, you have very lofty, high and meaningful and fine thoughts, but these are your thoughts, these are your imaginations. It's nice, it's a nice experience. It's an uplifting experience. But reality? What does that have to do with reality? This is your own making. We get up in the morning and we go and we put on tefillin. And we say, oh, really? We are doing a mitzvah, putting on tefillin. And the cynic comes from the side and says, why are you wrapping those straps around your hand? What is that? You can undo anything with cynicism. Anything. Shabbos. Everybody knows the experience of Shabbos, the holy day. All right. If you made it on Wednesday, it would be the same thing. It's all your own making. This whole thing, this whole intellectual trip, quote unquote, is all of your own making. Why is it possible to present it this way? Because in fact it is spiritual. It is not a tangible thing. And anything that's spiritual can be minimized, can be attributed to one's own creation. This is no different than what we spoke about before. Every individual person wants to know that he's an individual, that he has his individual purpose in life. And what does a psychologist say about that? Is it a sign of a soul, of a godly soul? This is his ego. It gives him a good feeling and good about himself. It inspires him about himself, about his own accomplishment. So this posuk, and it demands that we think about this and recognize the truth of it. This which we recognize in our intellect is not an imaginary thing. This is source, this comes from our human soul. This is who we are. This is the reality of a human being. We are all recognizing, we are all ready to recognize that the soul of the human being, this is the human, not the body. The body is only a means to accommodate the soul in the world. But it is the soul that is the principal presence. This is the real thing. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu says. But needn't stand. Atem Nitzovim. Nitzovim means you stand. Your standing means you stand steadfast. You're strong. You're convinced. You're committed. You think that this commitment is of your own making. And as I said, then the cynic in you can come and say, what is this all about? Moshe Rabbeinu explains. What it is about is that you deep down you recognize, truly recognize, that you are standing lifnei Hashem Elokeich. That this is a reality, this is a godly reality. This is not a man-made principle. This is truly a godly reality. It is something which a human being, as small as he may be, recognizes the godly truth in the world. And in that respect, the heads of tribes, the heads and the officers and the judges and the water carrier are all exactly the same. Because this truth, everyone knows individually. Everyone knows this individually. And with this truth, this is how a Yid approaches Rosh Hashanah. As it says, Atem Nitzovim Hayoim, the word Hayoim in this pasuk refers to the Yoim, the day of Rosh Hashanah. I'm sure you heard the Hayom Yoim about the Baal Shem Tov, the Shabbos Mevorkim, and so forth. This is how a Yid approaches Rosh Hashanah. That he reflects to himself that here he is, this little individual, and he is coming in front of the Meibashim, in front of Hashem, and he stands there and he identifies himself. I am here. I know who I am. I know what I stand for. No matter what else I'm involved with, this is my reality. This is who I am. This is what my name refers to. You know that this year, as very often happens, Nitzovim and Vayeilech, the two parshas, Nitzovim and Vayeilech, are joined together. We read them both together this coming Shabbos. Nitzovim and Vayeilech. There's an interesting Sikha from Rebbe, where the Rebbe explains Nitzovim Vayeilech, where he says, on the one hand, they're two separate parshas. On the other hand, they join together very often. As a matter of fact, it really says that Nitzovim Vayeilech are really supposed to be one parsha. They are one parsha initially. But sometimes we split them because we need an extra Shabbos. There's an extra Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. If there's a Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, then Nitzovim Vayeilech have to be split. If there is no Shabbos, then they're not split. But essentially they're one pash. And the Rebbe is pointing out the following. He says, Nitzovim and Vayeilech, by virtue of their names, seem to be saying two opposite things. Because the word Nitzovim means standing steadfast. And Vayeilech means you walk. Walking means that the person is in a state of flux. It's constantly changing. Hopefully changing in the right direction. He's growing, but it's a constant activity. Nitzovim is something which stands steadfast without change. So the Rebbe is asking, how are these two things, on the one hand, joined together, on the other hand, they are separate? And logically, they are separate. They're completely opposite aspects in a person's life. Nitzovim in the person, there is a Nitzovim aspect in the human being, and then there is a Vayeilech aspect in the human being. The Nitzovim aspect in the human being, this is what we discussed this moment before. This is what stands steadfast. This is where a Yid recognizes Hashem, and not just recognizes as an individual. He recognizes that he is in fact in front of Hashem. This is the reality. This is the reality, his reality, the reality of the world. As we discussed many times in these sessions and in class, that in truth, the person has the presence of mind and the freedom of thought, and is not barraged, so to speak, by pressures of his circumstances. He can think with his open and clear mind. He looks at this world, he sees that this is a godly world. Like we say in davening, Hashomayim Mesaprim Kvoid Keim. But the Shomayim, what is the Shomayim tell you when you look up in the Shomayim? You see the godly glory. You see, this is not a worldly thing. This is not a finite entity. This is beyond conception, beyond human imagination. So the recognition of a godly presence, this is there constantly. Except that, as I said, we get imprisoned, and we get barraged under the yoke, under the confusion of our daily concerns, and we forget about the reality. I mentioned one time, and this is something which is important to reflect from time to time. It says, it's brought down in Yom Yom also, that one of the great favors that Hashem has done with the human being, in the way he created his stature, his form, is that the human being will always see the earth and the sky at the same time. An animal walks on all fours, and essentially its eyes are focused on the earth. An animal can live and can realize, so to speak, its reality just by looking at the earth. Not a human being. A human being sees the earth, but he also sees beyond. All the time. He sees the end of the earth all the time. Because he's bigger than that. And he recognizes that the world that he's looking at is greater than world. It's a godly presence. This recognition, this cognizance, this ability to see it is Nitzovim. This is with the human being all the time. This is provided to him by his very soul, by the fact that he is a human being, especially that he's a Yid. Then there is Vayeilech. There is a process that goes on with the human life. What is the process? Process is his intellectual development. What he learns, what he understands, what he knows. This is something which increases all the time. It's in constant flux. One day he understands, the other day he has a kasha, the next day he has an answer, the next day he has a kasha. It's constantly growing. In Torah, in our Torah, in the Holy Torah that Hashem gave us, we also have these two parts. Torah, you know, consists of two parts. Torah should be Ksav and Torah should be Alpeh. The written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah is Nitzovim, is standing steadfast, it cannot change. It is extremely precise, exactly the way it was given to us, it was written down by Moshe. Exactly that way we have it today. Over 3,500 years, there is no way this can possibly change. This Torah cannot possibly change. The Torah is so precise that if there is an extra vav in the Torah, even if the reading of the word doesn't change, the meaning of the word doesn't change at all.
Not kosher.
Extra vav, or a vav short, the Torah becomes possible. You count the letters. And the Gemara says, not only the letters, but even the koitzim, the little thorns on top of the letters. It's called koitzim. The little vovs that go out on top of the letters also have significance. And they're all applicable of how many different koitzim you have on each letters. It's exactly precise the way it is. Then there is Torah Shebe'al Peh, the oral law, which was also taught to Moshe Bar Sinai. This oral law was given to Moshe. All the principles of how the oral law is to be learned and developed were given to Moshe. And you can't deviate from these principles. Move away, go left or right. But the basis of these principles have developed a Torah Shebe'al Peh of huge proportion. The Mishnayos, you know that Mishnayos, the Mishnah, for many years, up until Rabbeinu HaKodesh, the Mishnayos were all learned orally, by heart. They were never written codified like we have it. They were not allowed to be written down. They were learned orally. But the halacha is, to be exact, that a person was allowed to make notes for himself, but he couldn't publicize it. He needed to remind himself of something. He's allowed to have notes. But this is when he reads it, he has to remember. Oh yeah, that reminds me of the thing. But it has to be oral. It's a Torah Shebe'al Peh. There's no precision, and this has developed enormously after Rabbeinu HaKodesh, who decided that it has to be written down, otherwise it's going to get lost because of the diaspora, because of the spread of the breakup of the Jewish people, the nation. And then afterward was the Gemara, hugely developed, and after that there were the other generations up to the Giyonim and the Rishonim, the Rambam and the Rashi, and you heard of these. And then up to this day, there are Sforim being produced daily. Today, in our day, Sforim are being produced in tremendous rapidity. And this is all part of Torah Shebe'al Peh. And it's all based, and it all has a basis in the principles that Moshe Rabbeinu taught. But this is Vayeilech. This is constantly on a constant move. It's constantly developing. This is why, when you ask a shaila, you have to ask a Rav, a practicing Rav. Why a practicing Rav? Why can't you open the Shulchan Aruch? It's printed out in the Shulchan Aruch. So in the Shulchan Aruch, you should do this and that. Do this and that. The answer is that the Rav, just like lahavdul in medicine, a doctor has to keep up with the latest medical advances, medical findings. A doctor who does not keep up with medical journals will in very short order become out of, will lose his handle of what's going on. Out of touch with what's going on. Because there are new things which are being found and developed and discovered all the time. And if he's a responsible doctor, he has to keep up. Habla Rov, in order to be able to paskin a shaila, especially a current shaila, he has to keep up with all the responses, all the correspondences among the various rabbanim, so that he knows how rabbanim paskin these shailas today. This is all Vayeilech. This is in constant state of flux. And a person in his own life has to have these two principles. He has to have the Nitzovim, and as we said before, this Nitzovim, he has to remember that this is very real. He has to identify his true insight, his true recognition of Nitzovim Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. His emunah. He has to come to grips with that. And know that this Nitzovim, this gives strength. This is the basis for the Vayeilech. This is the basis for anything that he will encounter in his life, no matter where it is. In order to be able to cope with the various experiences that a person is exposed to, in order to be able to understand what's going on around him, to understand what's going on in the world, one must have this clear understanding. What is this all about? This is the basic introduction of today's parsha. Atem Nitzovim Ayom Kulchem. And then, as you've learned, and you continue to learn, the parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu goes on and gives us a perspective of what the Torah and mitzvahs mean to us. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, amongst other things, that because of the exposure to the world, and because you always have this cynic in you, it's conceivable that you will be in Golus, and you will be lost among the nations. You'll be lost among the nations, B'ktzei HaShamayim, at the end of heaven. B'ktzei HaShamayim means when a Yid finds himself in such a lost situation where he can't relate to anything around him. There is no reality. Everything is just flowing in every direction. So you may think that if you reach that point, then you will lose the Nitzovim. You will lose that steadfast truth that is in you. You have been thrown around from one end of the world to the other. B'tzei hashamayim. And therefore it's not you anymore. And this is what Moshe said. That is the time when you will first realize and you will first recognize that this entire confusion doesn't really affect you. It's confusion, and you want to catch hold of yourself, and you catch hold of yourself in those moments, and you say, wait a second. There is reality. There is Nitzov. There is the real me. That doesn't change. And that's what the Pasuk says. You learned it. Hashem will gather you in from wherever you get lost. Because this Nitzov, this strength, this personal strength that you have is real. It is a real connection to Hashem. And this is going to awaken you, wherever you are. There is no way that can be lost. There's no way that Ayid can get lost. And this is what happened. Everybody knows, everybody here is of a similar experience. You have a person who gets lost in the world, Ayid, and he wakes up on whatever circumstances it is that wake him up, and he says, I've lost my personal identity. This cannot be. I'm not an animal. I can't live day by day, just be thrown around by the wind. Who am I? I'm for real. I have a nitzov, I have a real presence, a real neshama. And this is when he wakes, he picks himself up and says, forget about everything, I need to know who I am. And as a result of that, he emerges out of that confusion and goes to a yeshiva and finds himself again. He doesn't become necessarily Roshechem Shiftechem, but he is back in the fold. He knows who he is. He knows that he's standing Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Then Moshe Rabbeinu says that you have to know, this is all part of this Nitzovim Vayeilech. You have to know that the mitzvah, meaning the Torah that I'm giving you, is not distant from you. You think you've come belatedly to Yeshiva. You just came in. And you didn't have the beginnings, so to speak, normal beginnings. You've just come out because you woke up. But you woke up at such an advanced stage in life. And this is not accessible to you. This is Bashomayim, to learn this, know this Bashomayim, that you have to climb up into the heavens, you have to really go very high, or if you go across the seas. This is all right there in the Parsha. Right there in the Parsha. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want you to know. This is really so amazing. And Moshe is speaking to every generation at all times, specific and really pertinent words that pertain right here, right this moment. It's never too late. It's not too far away. It's not too difficult. And everyone absolutely can delve and get to know Torah. Again, there will be 10 denominations. There will be Roshechem, Shiftechem, there will be Choyte V'Yitzecha V'Sheiv Meinech. But everybody belongs there. Everybody has it. everybody can come and stand in front of Hashem. The message of this could be inspiring and uplifting, but what I would like to so to speak press on you here is not just the inspiration and uplifting. I would like you to recognize that the spiritual part of the human being, the intellectual part of the human being, that which a person conceives just in his intellect, is nothing tangible about it. That is the real person. This is the eternal person. Here, we give Misholim for this. We give illustrations, something that everybody who was here before heard this, that the intellect of the human being, this is what defines what the human being is. And I gave a very simple example. The example of a feast. People come into a feast, to a chasana, to a wedding feast, and they see a whole feast, tables and chairs, and food, and all kinds of things going on. And a cat goes into that room. What does the cat see? Everything that's tangible. It sees the food. He sees the tables and chairs, how to get to that food and so forth. As far as the cat is concerned, the reason there's a chair is because I can jump up from the chair and the table to get the food. That's all it is. What does a human being see when it comes into this? The first question is, what is it about? What is it about? What's going on? What's going on? The food. So imagine somebody saying to you, hey, nothing's going on. That's your imagination. It's the food that's going on. This is exactly the same way as somebody says that your perception of the truth of God is your imagination. Nothing's going on. This is the real human being. This is the way a human being sees the world, sees himself. We only should have the strength to hold on to this, and carry this through in our life, in Vayeilech, in our daily life, and not be swayed by this cynic, by this Amalek, like you said, who throws a damper and starts saying that you better look at the world like the cat looks. It's more tangible, it's more real. No, that's not real for the human being. The reality is the way the intellect sees it, the way the neshama sees it. Hashem should help each one of us and Klal Yisrael, that we should find the strength to identify ourselves and come steadfast with full strength in front of Hashem and say, we're standing here in front of you, we know who you are, we recognize you, and we only want to live in this truth. And Hashem will then help every one of us and help the whole world to reveal the truth, the godly truth in the world. And to bring the Geula Shlema for the whole world. It's Hashem. We should have a Vayeilech and Yor. I don't know what next week is going to be, I'm not sure. But this week we can also wish Aksima Aksimateh with everyone. And we should remember this Nitzovim. Don't be swayed by the wind, and by doubt, and by problems. There is an indestructible part in the human being, because there's a godly spark in it, and that's indestructible. We have to resolve with Nebuchadnezzar's Hilf in approaching Rosh Hashanah, to resolve to bring this strength into practice. This is what a resolution is about. To bring it to some kind of practice and to hold on to it, to carry it through. Have a good year. Sorry to disturb.
No.